There we go. I'm going to introduce Kayla in just a second. She's going to give our presentation, and then we are going to have a question and answer session at the end. What I would encourage you to do, just like I do with our students, when you have those burning questions, go ahead and put those in the chat. We'll keep an eye on those and put similar questions together. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll go through those. So at any time, if you've just got a burning question, go ahead and pop it in the chat. And then we'll see at the end, depending on how many people end up joining us, we may have opportunity for just open questions. But for now, if you can put those in the chat. Welcome, everybody. So glad to have you here. I see some familiar names and some not so familiar. We're really pleased to welcome Kayla Steffens this evening. She has a really unique perspective because she's one of those gifted kids. So she was a former gifted student who now works in education, specializing in gifted children. She was born and raised in Englewood and attended Englewood Public Schools and was the first in her family to graduate from high school. So Kayla was identified as gifted in third grade. She went on to attend DU on a Betcher scholarship and graduated with her bachelor's in sociology and psychology. Then she just kept going and got her master's in curriculum and instruction, specializing in gifted education as well as culturally and linguistically diverse education. She is currently working toward her doctorate degree in curriculum and instruction, again with a specialization in gifted. So just a wonderful perspective, and growing up, being identified early and still showing a passion. It's really fun. I have a lot of fun talking to Kayla and feeling her passion for gifted children and gifted education and how we can reach these children. Kayla currently works as a middle school math teacher in Westminster Public Schools. She's also on the board of SOMI CAGT, which is the South Metro affiliate of CAGT, Colorado Association for Gifted and Talented Children. She's also the founding board member and vice president of SOMI. And she was appointed to serve on GESAC, which is the Gifted Education State Advisory Committee, as a community representative for Congressional District 7. As well as that, and I don't know how you're possibly doing your doctorate in all of this, but she volunteers with Destination Imagination as the South Metro Denver Regional Director. So drawing on her doctoral research this evening, Kayla is going to talk about the association between giftedness and creativity, and leave you with a few tools that you can use to support your child's creativity at home. So welcome, Kayla. Thank you so much for finding an evening to present to our parents. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. No, I'm very excited to be here and share what I know about giftedness and creativity. Is this okay? Can we see my screen? Okay, good. Just wanted to check. So today we're going to be talking about nurturing the creative spark in gifted kids. As Beth just explained, I'm Kayla Steffens. I was a gifted student, and I was identified in the third grade after a teacher referred me. So universal screening did not catch me. I needed to be referred to gifted and have additional testing done in order to be identified. Currently, I work as an educator. I'm a secondary math teacher, so I teach middle school. At my current school, I teach all of middle school. So I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And I work at a competency-based school. So I teach students at whatever level they need. So I have some students working on up to level 10 math, which is pretty exciting. And then I am a doctoral student, and my research area is creativity, which is why I'm here today. So some of our guiding questions, these are the 4 questions that were outlined on the event. And these are the 4 questions we're going to be talking about today, which are: what does creativity look like? How do gifted children express their creativity? How does this change as they grow and mature? So creativity looks different throughout the lifespan. And then how can you as parents nurture your child's creativity? So to start off, I want to talk about what creativity looks like. And so really there are 3 different ways that researchers try to conceptualize creativity, 3 broad ways. The first is domain general. And so this is the creativity that we hear about a lot. This is quick problem solving and coming up with different ways to attack problems. Torrance is a really big researcher here, and the 4 ways that he describes creativity are fluency, flexibility, originality, and elaboration. And so fluency is the idea of having a bunch of different ideas. So this is like a brainstorming type of situation. Flexibility is thinking about ways that a banana could be a phone, or a banana could be a boomerang, or a banana could be a hat, for example. Originality is how unique are those ideas that people come up with. So if everybody in this room, if we asked everybody in this room, what are the different ways you could use a banana? Most of us might say a cell phone, but very few of us would say, I don't know, a purse, maybe. That would be an original idea. And then elaboration is how intense is the story behind it. So if you ask somebody to elaborate on something and they can tell a really broad, intense story about it, then they would have really high elaboration. So these are 4 different areas that make up your general creativity. And so that is like one way that the pendulum swings when we think about creativity. As a researchers, we think about this domain general piece where these are the 4 things that make up creativity: fluency, flexibility, originality, and elaboration. On the other side, we have domain-specific creativity. And this is the idea of creativity existing within specific areas. So for example, this might look like as you become an adult, you are a computer science person. And so you are very creative as a computer scientist. Or maybe you're a very creative doctor or a very creative teacher. Those are areas that would be very domain specific. You may not see yourself as having domain general creativity, so creativity everywhere in your life, but you know that in your profession, you have that one area that you are able to be really creative, create new ways of thinking, new ways of doing. And so that is your domain specific creativity. But something that we've been looking at recently is that creativity might actually be both. There is some sort of domain general aspect to it, and there's some sort of domain specific aspect to it. And this is where we come to the Amusement Park Theoretical Model of creativity. There are several models of creativity that outline specific or general or a combination of both, but this is the one that I'm using in my research, and so it is the one that I'm the most familiar with. The Amusement Park Theoretical Model of creativity has 4 different levels to it, and it's really working from a domain general, so thinking about all of the different ways you can be creative in all aspects of your life, and then funneling that into a specific micro domain. And so I'm going to go through each of these with that amusement park theory. I really like that they use an amusement park because I think it makes it easy to understand. It's kind of more fun. So we've got 4 levels. You have your initial requirements, which is that most broad version. Then you have your general thematic areas, then your domains, and then your micro domains. And so those initial requirements in an amusement park, that might be something like having money, right? If you're going to go to an amusement park, you would have to have money to buy your ticket. You'd have to have money to get into the park. You might need transportation, right? Whether if you live close, you might just have to walk. But if you live far away, you might need a car. Those are initial requirements. There's no way you're getting to an amusement park if you don't have money and you don't have transportation. This is similar to creativity, because if you are going to be creative, there are certain things that a person just has in order to be creative. And we find that those things are intelligence, motivation, and an environment. So creativity and intelligence are related. There is a specific level of intelligence that a person must have in order to be creative. And that is that close link to giftedness that we see with creativity and giftedness. The next piece is motivation, which is your intrinsic or your extrinsic motivation, something that drives you to be creative. If you don't have a reason to be creative, you won't be creative. So that is one of those initial requirements, like money to get into the park. The third one is having an environment that allows you to be creative. If you are a person that could be very, very creative violin player, but you don't have access to a violin and you live in a small town where there are no violins to be found, you will probably never get the opportunity to elaborate on that creativity. And so you need that environment. The environment piece is something we'll come back to later, because that is the thing that I think as parents, you have the most control over. The next level we have here is general thematic areas. And that is thinking about, now that we've decided we're going to the park, we have money and tickets to get in, and we have a car to get there. Now, where do we want to go? And this is where you decide, what is that park that you want to go to? Is it a water park that you want to go to? Do you want to go see like cartoon characters? What kind of park are you looking for? And this is similar to creativity, because this is where you've got your big domains. So we're thinking about things like scholarly creativity. So being a writer, or somebody that publishes research or something like that. Or maybe we're thinking about math and scientific, where it's really broadly math scientific, or something broad like performance, where you've got dance, you've got visual arts, you've got graphic design, all of those different components that come into performance. And so that is your general thematic area. That's us narrowing down what kind of park are we getting. And then you can narrow even further and get even more specific into domains. So these domains are picking which park we're going to. So if we decided we're going to go see some cartoon characters, are we talking about going to Disney, or are we talking about going to Universal Studios? Like which specific park are we thinking about going to? So for example, in creativity, if we have decided math and science is the domain we're creative in, now we take it a step further. Math and science is really broad. Are we talking chemistry, psychology, economics, applied mathematics? What specifically are we thinking about? And then we can narrow even further into our micro domains. And our micro domains are within the amusement park. Now that we're here, we're at Disney or wherever we're at, we're in the park. Where are we going? What rides are we choosing to ride? Which area? Are we going to the kiddie land? Are we going to hang out at Harry Potter World? I don't know. Where are we actually going within the park? And this is the most specific we can get. So we're thinking general thematic is math and scientific. We narrow to psychology, and we narrow even further. Are we talking about neuroscience, cognitive psychology, organizational psychology? What are we really thinking here? So this is how we see creativity really is both domain specific, general, domain general, and domain specific. We see that creativity really bridges both. But then how do gifted children express their creativity? Now that we have a baseline for what creativity is, how it's defined, what different aspects we can look at it through, how do gifted children show their creativity to us? And I think it's really important to recognize that there is a link between IQ and creativity. And so we see that there is a specific IQ level that supports creativity. And having that is a necessity to being creative, at least in the research, that's what it's showing. The other question that comes up a lot of the time is, how are giftedness and creativity related? Currently in like the law, we have creativity defined as its own area of giftedness. So you might be identified as gifted in math, or gifted in performing arts, or gifted in world language, or gifted in creativity. But some researchers are arguing that creativity is actually the thing that makes you gifted, or one of the components that adds to your giftedness, that adds to the uniqueness that creates a gifted person. And so I think that's something that's still coming up, and both aspects are really viewed, and researchers go back and forth on that. So I think that's something fun that we will see develop over time. I want to show you some fun traits. So this is, there's actually a graphic that goes with this, and I'll share that link later in this presentation. Wonderful graphic that shows the difference, or outlines the difference between bright children, intellectually gifted children, and creatively gifted children. And so, for example, an intellectually gifted child would be beyond the group. We see this where your student is learning quicker than their peers, and they're just ready to move on faster. But a creatively gifted child would be in their own group. The things that they're interested in are so vastly different from that of their peers, or they're taking what they're learning in class and moving it even a step further. That is so unique that there aren't other peers necessarily within their group, they're in their own space. Another one that I want to point out is comprehending in-depth complex ideas. You're a gifted child, your intellectually gifted child is going to be able to comprehend those complex ideas, but may and is going to be able to comprehend those complex ideas and is going to be able to innovate on those. But when you see a creatively gifted child, they are overflowing with ideas. The things that they are learning and hearing about create so many ideas in their brain that they are not going to have the opportunity to develop every single idea. They're multi-potentialites, I guess would be a good way to think about it. All of those different ideas that are so exciting that they want to explore, they may never get the chance to, because that's just what creativity looks like. I'll give you a moment to read the rest of these or a few more. I have a few more slides that I'll highlight a few from, but I think these are fun. And if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. You don't have to hold on to them. This is the next one where it just talks about different components. So for example, an intellectually gifted child might create those complex, abstract pieces of humor. We know that humor and giftedness are, humor can be an indicator of giftedness. But your creatively gifted child is going to absolutely adore things that are absurd and off the wall type humor, things that are wild. And so I think that's another nice little component that you can see in your creatively gifted child. And again, I will share this with you at the end. It is quite long, but I'm happy to share this with you. So now that we've talked about some of those traits that show up and we've talked about what creativity looks like, I also want to share with you how creativity changes over time. So creativity looks different throughout your lifespan. Typically, when you start off your life, you want to be more domain general. So the creativity that we see in young children is really general. We want them to be able to problem solve and to be able to attack any type of problem, regardless of what area it's in, right? We want them to be generalists. We want them to be pretty good at about everything. Then as we start to get older and students start to get to high school and off to college and into their careers, we see them specialize. And that's where that domain specificity comes in. And we see more of a domain specific type of creativity as they get older. The other important thing to know about creativity is that it is not linear. You are not going to see a creative child grow in a linear fashion all the way through their education. This is something that happens in growths and slumps. And so there are going to be periods of time when a child grows rapidly creatively and then slumps for a little bit. And then you see them grow again, and then they slump. And then maybe it takes them a while to get back on that growth trajectory. But it is absolutely not a linear process. And seeing those slumps doesn't mean your child is not creative. It's just a part of the process. So let's talk a little more specifically about the creativity across the lifespan. As a child, researchers have observed creativity as early as 2 years old. And this looks like imagination or pretend play. Like I mentioned earlier with the banana, it's the kids picking up the banana and pretending it's a cell phone, right? That is a form of creativity that we see very, very early on. And then as they start to enter grade school, that's usually when the first slump hits, right? We think about that impact that has on the environment, that transition of being really comfortable in your home to now you're in a school. That transition is messy. Your environment gets messy. So we see that slump entering grade school. Then they start to pick up again and start growing and growing. And then we hit 4th grade. And for some reason, 4th grade has a slump. Researchers aren't 100% sure what causes that. We don't know. If I had to make a guess, it would probably be that that's that big change from learning to read to reading to learn. That would be my guess. But we're not sure. Still preliminary, still figuring it out. Then as we move forward into adolescence, we see another slump hit from primary to secondary school. Again, we can think about the environmental factors of moving from a building you've been in from until 5th or 6th grade and then moving into that secondary school. And we do see that it happens when you make that switch. So if you're in a school that goes from 6th grade up until 6th grade and then switches to 7th, that's when the slump hits. If you see a school that goes up until 5th grade and then you switch for 6th, that's when the slump happens. It's really that transition period. The important thing about adolescence and middle school and into high school is that this is when those individual factors really pop up. And it becomes really important that the child is intrinsically motivated and wants to be creative, is interested in things, is curious, and wants to try new things out. It's really important that your school is encouraging creativity and that your home is encouraging creativity and encouraging curiosity. We want students to be curious, to have questions, to ask those questions, and we want to keep fostering that. And so that is something really important, especially in the adolescent years when it doesn't come up as much. It's also really important that students are given the opportunity to make decisions. This is huge, especially in adolescence. We see that it is very closely related to creative potential later. And then as we get out of high school and into the workforce or into college, we see some different impacts in early adulthood. So one of the correlations that we see, and I do want to be careful with that language, it is correlative, meaning it looks like these two things are related, but it doesn't mean that one necessarily causes the other. So something that is correlated here is that creativity in late high school and in early college predicts early career creativity. And so we see that those two things are related. We see that creativity in late high school and creativity in early college actually supports or is related to early career creativity. And so I think that can be really helpful to think about, that we want to make sure we're fostering it in children so that when they get into their careers, it's a little more likely that they'll be creative. It's also important to think about supportive social environments. So as you get older and as you get into the workforce, as you get into your higher levels of college, you really need to have a supportive social environment and be surrounded by other creative adults. We see that young adults that are in those supportive social environments, so a supportive job where they value creativity, a supportive set of friends that are all working towards some creative goal together, we see that those adults tend to be more creative. And so building those relationships can be really, really important. So now I want to talk a little bit about what parents can do. So going back to the model that I shared with you earlier, there are two big components that are those initial requirements. It's really important that we start with the initial requirements because the domain-specific stuff will come later. And we need to make sure that we are providing all of the opportunity for students to have access to being creative. I first want to talk about these individual factors off to the side because these are things that the individual has to have. So these are things that the child would need to have. And you can foster some of those things and support some of those things. But we want to see children that have high cognitive ability, which our gifted children do, right? We want to see children that value and use divergent thinking skills. And so that is coming up with many different ways to solve problems, solving problems in unique ways. Those domain general skills that we talked about earlier. We want to see that the child is interested and motivated by tasks. So they want to complete things, they want to get things done, they are focused and ready to move forward. We also want to see children that are open to experience, that want to learn new things and that want to try new experiences, that are flexible and okay with things being a little risky. And that's a hard thing to teach, but definitely something that is valuable. And then the last one that individuals we really want to see, if we're talking about creative individuals, things that predict creativity, are overexcitabilities. So seeing that intensity, that can look so many different ways, but seeing things like being very interested in music, feeling very intensely about that, or feeling, having an oversensitivity or a sensitivity to, sound, touch. Overexcitabilities is another great word to research, but there are different ways of seeing that intensity in a child that can predict creativity. So then parents, you have a little more flexibility over those environmental factors because that is the setting that you are choosing to set up and provide. And we see that environmental factors have a huge impact on creativity. It's one of those initial things. If a child's environment does not support creativity, it's going to be hard for them to be creative. And so these are some of the environmental factors that you have a lot of control over. Encouraging curiosity is number one. Just supporting and wanting them to ask questions and to be curious about what is happening around them. The next one is giving the child an opportunity to make decisions. We want to see them trying different things. Of course, we know they're not always going to make the decision you might want them to make, but it is important that they have the opportunity to try something out and maybe mess it up, and that's okay. The next is respecting opinions. And the important piece here is not so much that it is very important that you are respecting their opinions, but it's really important that the child is the one feeling respected. And so when you are respecting their opinions, it's important to do those check-ins and make sure that the child is feeling as heard as you are trying to make sure that they are feeling. You are trying to hear them, you are trying to respect them, and it's important that they are feeling that too. So it really matters how respected they are feeling. The next one is enrichment activities. So making sure this is about building those social connections and building that environment for them to get feedback. So if you find that your child is interested in something, let them have some access to those enrichment activities to get around other people that are passionate about the same thing so that they can develop their creativity with other creative peers in the same creative space. That's going to help from that transition from domain to general. Nope, from general to domain specific creativity. And so those enrichment activities can be really, really helpful. Improv is just a helpful domain general skill. It's thinking about acting in the moment, acting on the spot, testing out different ideas, and just quick thinking, rapidly solving problems. It's just a fun activity. If you're looking for an enrichment activity, improv is a great direction to go. Promoting and providing positive feedback about creativity. This is really, really important. So research shows that feedback is critical in developing creativity. And this looks like giving feedback that is honest, but also giving feedback that is positive and encourages future creativity. Sometimes it's hard to do that, especially if you're not the expert in a field and your child is absolutely understanding something more than you do. I know this happens to me all the time in my classroom, right? I'm a math teacher, but if I have a gifted child who is very into math and is very creative in math, sometimes that child learns more than I will ever know about something, and that's okay. But I need to find them a mentor or somebody that can support them with giving them feedback on what they're doing so that they're getting that positive experience with their feedback, but also getting feedback so that they can continue to grow and foster their own creativity. The next piece here is delaying gratification. This is super important because the creative process is slow. So we need to make sure that our creative children are able to commit to these long-term projects without getting rewards right away. Being creative is slow and it takes time. And there are going to be times when you do something and you don't like it and you have to erase it and start all over, or it takes a long time. It's an important, slow process. And so practicing delaying that gratification is going to be valuable for them later. Building their self-efficacy is important. Building their belief in themselves that they are creative and that they can do unique and creative things is very important. We want to see that a child has that belief in themselves. And so building self-efficacy is very important here. And then, of course, celebrating mistakes. Being creative means taking risks. And so there are going to be times when things do not work out right, and that's okay. We celebrate the mistakes, we learn from them, and we move on. The last thing that I want to share with you are some resources, some different readings. This pink box here is the link to that graphic that I showed you that was on several slides, comparing a bright child to an intellectually gifted child to a creatively gifted child. So if you're looking for that or some more reading on that, this is the link that you can go to. I also have these two books. The reason that I recommend these books, they are by Csikszentmihalyi. And the reason that I recommend them is I think they are absolutely magnificent. Csikszentmihalyi is a psychology researcher. And so all of his stuff on creativity comes out of a psychology brain. But these books are brilliant in that they are fun to read. and they are fascinating. They do pull in some research, so it's nice because you understand that this is coming from a research perspective. It is, you know, he's highly regarded in the field, but also that it is fun to read. Like, this is something that you could definitely throw on in the car and listen to, or something that you could read out of a book and be engaged in the whole time. And both of these books are wonderful. I like Creativity a lot because it's focusing on individuals and their experiences. And then Flow is talking more about being in a creative state of flow, where there are just times that as a creative person, you get locked in on what you're doing. And what does that flow state feel like? And how does it work? And so I think these two books are just absolutely magnificent. If you would like something that's more research heavy, I'm happy to recommend it. Just send me an email and I can get you whatever it is that you are interested in learning more about. I also want to talk about enrichment activities. I have Destination Imagination here because I volunteer with Destination Imagination, but part of the reason I do that is because it is such a magnificent program that really bridges domain specific and domain general creativity. And so we see that in Destination Imagination, you pick a challenge, and the challenges are domain specific. So you're picking a technical challenge, or you're picking a scientific challenge, or you're picking a fine arts challenge. And then you are building from that. So you're developing that domain specific skill. You're also developing a domain general skill, because there is a second part of the challenge called instant challenge. And that is where you go in and they give you a challenge on the spot and you have 5 minutes to solve it. And you might build something, or you might tell a story. It really depends on what the challenge is, but it is that rapid ideation, that quick thinking, that fluency, flexibility, originality, and then elaborating with those 4 components for domain general. And the best thing that I like about this program is that it is a team. It is a team of 2 to 7 people that get together to solve a challenge. And we know that it is so important environmentally for children to have those peers that are being creative with them, so that they're growing with a group that are also interested in the same things they are. There are a ton of enrichment activities you can look for, right? If your child is very interested in a specific skill, find an enrichment activity that matches the skill so that they can grow with other people that are creative in that same way. This is just one that I'm very familiar with. And that's all that I really have for you. This is my phone number and my email. So please feel free to send me an email or send me a text message or give me a call if you are curious about anything or need anything more from me. But at this point, I'm happy to just open it up to questions and see what we're thinking. I threw a lot of information out there.
I'm going to go ahead and put a link to the Kingr Research in the chat. So if you want to get that. And then Kayla, I know we're recording this. Are we going to have the slides available then if somebody wanted to see those so they can click on that directly? I'm going to go ahead and put this link in the chat as well. All right. I think we've got a small enough group. If somebody's got a burning question, go ahead and just chime in. I don't see anything in the chat right now. But go ahead and shout out.
I have a question. You had talked about them, like the kids being able to problem solve. And that's something I'm having a hard time with my son, is getting him to think outside the box and figure out more solutions. And I've been working on it with him because he kind of just gets frustrated when he comes up with a problem and kind of shuts down. So what can I do to help?
Sure. I think there are a ton of different resources on this. I think brainstorming is number one, super helpful, and doing that with things that don't even matter. So before there's ever even a problem, just like random, like let's just brainstorm all the different ways that you can do something without it even being a problem. So like, what are all the different ways you could use a marker? What are all the different ways you could use a water bottle? Like, what could this be in an imaginary land? I think can be really helpful. There are also just some fun activities like giving students, one of the tests that comes from Torrance, who is one of the researchers on domain general creativity, is a figural test. So it's figures and it's the same picture over and over and over again on a piece of paper. So it's like circle, it's a circle, but there's like 40 of them on a paper. And you would ask children to draw as many pictures as they can on a piece of paper. And so trying to turn all of those circles into something different can be a really good practice for just getting your brain out of its mindset and trying to come up with different ways of doing things. I think those are helpful.
I like that idea. Thank you. I'm going to try the circles.
Any shape would really work for that too. So if you have other shapes, they're fun.
Kayla, this is Tammy with Macintosh. A couple people said that they sent you questions through chat direct message, so I can't see them if you want to check that.
Oh, I see them. I see them. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I missed these. Okay, so I see, what about a perfectionist gifted child who doesn't like to try new experiences and activities? This is very, very common, right? We see this a lot, like with our giftedness and perfectionism, like they definitely come in and it makes things really tricky and messy. And I think just practicing different skills can be really helpful, and practicing that I think like self-efficacy is that really important piece here of helping the student just believe in themselves and like coming up with those positive mantras. Like, what is it that you can say every time you mess something up that tells you it's okay? What is that thing that you can repeat to yourself over and over and over again so that you have a strategy for when something upsets you? Also, how can we practice those new experiences in a safe environment? And so maybe that looks like trying improv, but doing it with your best friends. Or maybe that looks like coming up with all of the different ways that you could use something, for example, when it's not in a stressful situation. Or gosh, I just had something in my brain that was very helpful. I don't remember what it was. It will come back to me, I hope. Please follow up with me if I did not address your question all the way. I also see just some different, okay. So then the other thing that I was thinking of, I'm so sorry. Okay, so perfectionism. Sorry, here we go. So other things, so there's this activity that I taught. So I spoke at the National Conference for Gifted and Talented Children about improv, and Connolly's actually in the room, and she was my co-presenter on this. So Connolly, if you have any brilliance, feel free to chime in. But some of the activities that are improv activities can be really helpful for developing and getting comfortable with perfectionism. And so some of those things are like exquisite corpse. So exquisite corpse is something where you would take a piece of paper and you would draw, you would take a piece of paper and you would fold it up, right? And somebody would draw the first part of the corpse. So maybe this is its head. This is the monster's head. And then you would pass it to the next person and they would only see this blank side and they would draw the body. And then you would unfold it a little bit. They can't see anything. And the last person would draw the feet. And so of course it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to line up and it's going to be so silly. But when you unfold the whole thing, you've got this creepy monster looking thing. And I think just experiences like that, where it's focusing on building skills around things that are not meant to be perfect all the time, and that's okay, can be really helpful. I also think doing some destination imagination instant challenges, they have time requirements, but I think even just trying them out and saying, okay, we did this, we didn't meet the time, like what can we do better? And then saying, okay, now that we know that, let's try it again. And that would just be another experience. So finding anything where you can have a small amount of time focused on something, setting that limit and saying, okay, we're done. What can we do to fix it? And then saying, okay, let's try it again. And then they get the chance to apply those skills. It's just, yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. Perfectionism is tricky. I hope that helps. Thank you. Okay, I think that's all the questions so far. If I missed something, please just put it in there again.
Kayla, I was wondering, I loved your comment on allowing children that time to keep exploring without sort of those immediate rewards, which is where the video game kingdom lands a lot of the time. Do you have any sort of guidance in terms of ages and what's appropriate, right? Obviously, asking a 2-year-old to go for a long, long time without, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the younger ones can go longer without those rewards. Do you have any thoughts on, what does that look like in terms of how long can you ask a child to go before maybe they get that feedback or that moment that feels good?
That's a really great question. And off of the top of my head, I'm not sure what those limits are, but I do know that you can develop it and it can get longer and longer and longer. I'm not sure if we're familiar with the marshmallow challenge, but that can be a really, really fun one with some young kiddos. It is where you put a marshmallow on a table and you leave the room for 10 minutes and you ask the child to not touch or eat the marshmallow. And if they don't, you will bring them another marshmallow. And you leave them alone in the room for like 10 minutes and you come back and then you can give them another marshmallow. For some kids, really, really hard. And for some kids, it's totally fine. And so I would imagine that those things look really, really different. I do know that the attention span of a child is about their age, up to 15. And then from there, it's 15 minutes. So I imagine that if you have like a 10-year-old, 10 minutes is probably appropriate. An 8-year-old, 8 minutes is probably appropriate. But I can absolutely look up some research on those and get those official numbers for delayed gratification. I'll put them in the slide.
Does anybody else have any burning questions?
I'm going to drop. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say, I wonder, Kayla, if you might just share a little bit about the South Metro affiliate of CAGT. I don't know if some of the people here are familiar with that, because that's another way to connect with other parents and get strategies as we're all working through. Gifted children do not come with a handbook, and they can be interesting to raise. So maybe you could share a little about that.
Absolutely. So the South Metro CAGT affiliate, we are a community group that works in the South Metro Denver area, although we are open to anybody. All of our resources are available to anybody who is interested. I'm going to put our website in the chat. So our website is somicagt.org. And you can get on there, sign up for our newsletter, anything like that. But really, we are all about creating community. That's the whole reason that we started the organization was we just recognize that there is not enough community among gifted people. So gifted children, gifted families, their parents, their community members, anybody who's gifted. So really just thinking about how can we connect families? And we are working on some projects to come up with some supports for parents in the near future. So please do get on that newsletter so that we can connect you and come up with some resources and those sorts of things. There are also resources on that website. And so if you are interested in just looking at some creative resources or resources on anything, we can absolutely help there. And Connell, you want to chat?
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in real quickly. I'm working right now with Englewood Schools, excuse me, and Sheridan. And we will be offering through SOMI a parent support group based on embracing the whole gifted self. It's a book by Patricia Gatto Walden, which I'm sorry, I can't read that correctly. And that's going to be starting, I want to say, last Wednesday in March is our tentative shoot date. It'll be a 5-week program. And right now we're securing a location to meet because we're planning to do it in person to have that face-to-face opportunity with parents. So we'll look for the on the lookout for the flyer that'll be on our website. And then somebody will post it to Facebook who's extraordinary, not me. So that's coming.
Yes. So we've got some fun opportunities. I do see a question in the chat. Where do you suggest you look for toys for 5-year-olds to stimulate them? Oh, this is a good question. I mean, there are so many opportunities. It really depends on what your child is interested in. There are some game stores that sell things like snap circuits, and those are like a really cool way to get your child into electronics and into coding. Legos, of course, are like phenomenal and amazing because they're really open-ended. It's really about like, what can you create and coming up with different ways to think about things. Gosh, so many places to get toys for 5-year-olds.
Think Fun has some really good stuff online too. Usually if you find Think Fun toys, they have some great things to do. Trying to think, the train, it's the logic to make the train go through. And I mean, there's some really great stuff. I would look them up for sure. Critical Thinking is another great website that has some online games, which I know we're trying to get kids away from, but they have online games that kids can play that are strategy and thinking games. They also have books that you can order, and they can send you once a week 3 different challenges for kids to try. And if you like them, you can print them and give them to kids to do. Those are really fun through Critical Thinking.
Can I pipe in? I was the one that asked the question, and I'm wondering, I missed what you said right before the critical thinking. You mentioned a place after the snap circuit. It was, I think, Connolly who was adding. Do you mind repeating that?
Oh, Think Fun.
Think Fun.
Think Fun. Yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, I didn't hit the I was trying to put it in the chat and didn't hit the return. There it is. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm trying to think of I have tons of games. I actually just got a grant to buy a whole bunch of games for my district, and those are a lot of the games that we're going to be doing. Robot Turtles, that kind of thing. So Robot Turtles is probably good for 5. Blink, Quirkle. I'm just going off the top of my head. Think about the ones my kid liked to play when he was 5.
There are also some like computer online websites, like Scratch is a really good one, and it's about coding, but it's all drag and drop type of stuff. So you can do it with an iPad, and there's not a lot of typing, things like that. So that can be really helpful. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. Thanks, Connolly. And thanks, Amy. Okay, so Cheryl asks, can you speak more to creative giftedness and social isolation? How do you make friends if you're on your own creative island? I think, yes, like this is like the big question, right? It is giftedness on its own, right? You already have really shrunk down the group of people that are going to feel like peers to you. And then you add that creative level on top of it, and now you're looking at an even smaller group of people. And it is so challenging to find your tribe. I think it's really important to get students in enrichment activities that can help them find their tribe. And I think sometimes that looks like being creative with online resources. There are a lot of different things like, I think Minecraft is a really excellent video game that supports creativity because it is all about building and creating, and it's a very, very open world type of situation, but it also has some social components. And so I think really just finding space that your child is interested in and trying to find communities that support that interest is where it comes from. I also think you want to be really careful with who those peers are and recognize that those peers may not be same age peers. They may be children that are older or children that are younger than them. It's really about finding the interest, and you might have different pockets of peers. And so when you're thinking about that social isolation piece, you want to think about mentors and get creative with how you define peers, I think is really important too. I hope that helps. And Cheryl, how old is your child?
I have an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old.
An 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. Oh, so that makes it even harder. I feel like middle school is always so messy. So I think just finding those communities. I would also say like DI has such an amazing community. I think you just have to find those enrichment activities that really foster creativity and support creativity so that you can help your kid find their tribe. Like, I think that's really the important piece.
Thank you for that, Kayla.
Yeah, I hope it helps. It's not as tangible as I'd like it to be, but it's what I've got. It's a big question. If anybody else ever finds the answer to that, oh, you'd be winning.
All right. Well, I noticed that Kayla did share her email address as well. So I know, again, like a lot of our kiddos, you'll probably go home and think, oh my gosh, that was the question I wanted to ask. So definitely feel free to send that in. I think I'm speaking for you, Kayla, but that's all right, for them to go ahead and send you some questions. Thank you very much, Kayla. I really appreciate it. There's always something to take away from these things. And I love some of those things that you shared. We have some other topics coming up in the next couple of months, so watch out for those. Thank you everybody for taking time this evening to be here. And again, really thank you to Kayla. I appreciate you very much.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate all of your questions. If there is anything that comes up later, please send me an email. I am more than happy to help out however I can.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.